Dear Journal, how does a pony affect the world around her? Does she play an active part in the community? Does she work closely with individuals? Or does she work from the shadows, pulling strings from a distance? What if she can do neither of these things? What if she still wishes to make the world a better place for every pony she knows and loves? What if those whom she cares about can never know a single thing she's done, good or bad, to properly thank her for the motivation to begin with? I'm rediscovering a truth. In this village that serves as my prison, and on the fringes of a haunted landscape between the firmaments, I'm starting to grasp something that was taught to me long ago, but only now makes sense. Improving the world is not always about adding things to it, or removing important factors. Construction and destruction are simply means of shifting around the elements that are at our disposal. It's far too easy to forget that we ourselves are factors that mold and shape this universe, and oftentimes, the best way to solve a problem, or at least understand it, is by simply being there. It is suddenly storming. I don't think I'll make it home in time to stay dry. I'm running and running as fast as I can. Gah! Slippery puddles. Gotta be careful. Mommy's gonna be mad at me for ruining my mane. Of all the worst times to go outside. There's a flash of lightning. I hear myself shriek and I gallop faster through the rain-slick streets of Canterlot. I can see my apartment up ahead. Oh, sweet Celestia, I am so soaked. I come to a stop in the stairwell to my home, skating into the shadows. I bump into a wall and wince. I don't realize how cold I am until now. I shiver in the crook of the alcove, watching as streams of rain trickle down from the overhang above. The planted trees and flower gardens along the sidewalk are being flooded in the ugly gray weather. Oh, I moan. I look at the candied cone levitating my telekinesis, and pout at the sight of all the ice cream having washed away. Ah, I moan again, stamping a green hoof. And I just gave away my only 2 bits. I turn the cone over and over in my magical grasp. There is another boom of thunder, but it no longer frightens me. With a dull spirit, I lean forward and lightly nibble on the edge of the cone. It's soaked and soggy and thoroughly ruined by rainwater, but a tiny piece beneath it all is still sweet. I suckle on the sensation, hoping it'll prepare me for the tongue lashing I'm about to get from Mommy. With a heavy sigh, I trudge up the steps of the stairwell towards my apartment door on the 2nd story. I hear something. It's different from the rain and my hoof steps in the thunder. I stop in my tracks, feeling thunder again, this time in my chest, for I realize that the odd sound is coming from directly beneath me. Slowly, I squat down and peer through the gap between the steps, curious as to the source of the labored whimpers and sobs. It is then that I see her, curled up in the corner, shadowed from the rain and lightning. She's small, about my age, only tinier than me. She doesn't have a cutie mark either. I can't see her face from all the red and violet tangles of wet mane hair muffling her cries. For some reason, I'm not afraid. I swallow the cone whole and nearly gag. Blech! Tastes like cardboard. I giggle at myself, but the filly doesn't laugh one bit. She's too busy crying. It's like she doesn't even know that I'm here. Hello? I march quietly down the steps and move towards her, smiling. Did you get caught in the rain too? It's all because of those lazy Pegasi. Ugh. I wonder if this happens every day in Cloudsdale. What do you think? She says nothing. She shivers, hugging herself and curling even further into the deepest part of the corner. She's wetter than I am. How long has she been out in the rain? Hey, are you okay? I say as I squat down in front of her. Are you sad because your mane got all wet? Well, don't worry. I'm sure it's very pretty. You have some nice colors. Me? I smile and toss my head left and right, allowing the gray and turquoise strands to whip about. I could blend in at a greenhouse. That's such a funny word, greenhouse. It's not even green until you walk inside. She still doesn't say anything, but I think she's noticing me. She lowers her forelimbs and tilts her face up. I see a pair of eyes. One's violet, and the other one's violet and blue? No, wait. What's wrong with her face? Oh, what's wrong with your face? I ask. I then bite my lip, blushing. I mean, did you hurt yourself? She gulps, trembling as a flash of lightning catches a bruise on her cheek. She speaks, and it is a very gentle sound, like icicles snapping. I, I bumped into something trying to get out of this storm, she says. I make a face. Bumped into something? You're a unicorn, not some bumbling earth pony. I am, very clumsy, she stammers. I think that's very silly, but it doesn't matter. It's been a lonely weekend, and she looks like she could use a friend. My name is Lyra. I introduce myself properly, as Mommy always tells me to. Lyra Heartstrings. What's your name? She looks at me, and for a moment her trembles stop. Um, she bites her lip before ultimately confessing. Moondancer. My name is Moondancer. I took several heavy breaths, finding my center, steeling myself for the freezing waves to come. When they finally hit, I was ready for them, but it didn't make the experience any less excruciating. As soon as Twilight's Requiem was finished, I tilted my head back and clung tighter to the Nightbringer. When my hooves landed on the rusted platform, it was like touching death itself. A bitter shiver ran up my spine, culminating in my skull as my eyes were forced open in a determined glare. Before me, the unsung realm billowed with lightning and twirling tendrils of water. Constellations of rusted chains undulated towards and away from my body, as the platform I stood on spun perpetually in the chaotic nether. As soon as I breathed, and my vaporous exhales lit the cold hellscape, shackled ponies crawled like spiders out of their metallic holes, shuffling blindly towards me on the links of their rattling fetters. I did not fear them. After all, Alabaster was gone, and they weren't the ones I journeyed here to speak with. Gripping the Nightbringer tighter, I ran a hoof along its onyx strings. A high tone lit the tempestuous air, and a spear of golden energy encased me. The unsung ponies trotted as far as they could, ultimately colliding with the translucent barrier and banging their tormented limbs against it. I stared past them, shouting into the thunderous, cyclonic heavens. "Do not hide from me!" I exclaimed, my voice echoing above the anguished moans and ringing of metal. "You are a goddess. I am but a mortal, equipped with a piece of the same song that bound you here. Show yourself. Show yourself and be my audience." Only thunder and turbulence answered me. I felt a gale of wind surging across the platform. Several unsung equines flew off into the nether, while the Nightbringer's barrier fluctuated. But I did not budge an inch. "I am not leaving until I see you," I bellowed bravely, gnashing my teeth into the frigid winds and moisture. I held tight to the Nightbringer's golden body, as if it was a lost child. Its ancient energy and presence served as my anchor while I clung to the bones of forgotten chaos. "Do not..." I hissed and summoned an angry vibration from the center of my being. "Do not confuse this with a request. Show yourself. Now!" Just then, the heavens parted. A surging arch of water dissipated with a blast, like a bomb going off beneath the surface of a gigantic ocean. The moans around me doubled, quadrupled, as the shackled ponies prostrated themselves across the platform and moaned into their twitching limbs. I looked straight up in time to have my vision devoured by runes. There it was, her home, her floating fortress on high. The spears within spears rotated towards me, like a globe of spiraling menace. Ruins blurred over one another, as the round sarcophagus loomed closer overhead, brimming with violet beams of pulsating energy. I heard deep bass noises, and soon sharp salvos of unbridled sound reverberated off the archaic throne, sending rivulets of energy barreling through the cloud of moisture above the platform. The squirming ponies all around me mimicked her epic cry with moans. I broke through the chorus with a snarling voice. "No! I will not sing your song!" There were 2 more claps of thunder, but I sensed it was her this time and not the realm. "I will not become nothing!" Then she fired the first volley. A bolt of lightning rocketed towards me, sending a wall of sparks surging along the platform. The equine bodies caught flame in a screaming second. When the energy reached me, it splashed off the Nightbringer's shield with the sound of dying bells. I gritted my teeth and held my ground. "Join me!" I strummed a few strings and strengthened the shield against a furious discharge. "I've learned the 9th elegy. I've memorized Desolation's duet. You know this." The spears spun faster. Twin bolts of lightning flew my way. The golden shield pulsed around me, staving off the white-hot energy blasts as the platform started to melt from the heat. "Join me in the instrumental!" I shrieked against her fury. The spherical fortress was starting to float away, and my voice cracked in desperation as I implored her. "How many times do I have to tell you? I don't care about this realm. I don't care about the secret. We can finish the Nocturne together, and I can move on. Release me from this curse, and I won't bother you ever again. Please, help me. I must learn Dawn's Advent." The spears within spears were indiscernible now. All I could see was smoke and rain. The Alicorn goddess was gone. "I must learn it," I whimpered, hanging my head. I was alone, now more than ever. I must get home." All traces of her were gone. Even the thunder had dwindled. I started to hear the whimpers of the unsung ponies stirring up again. I knew better than to wait for another appearance. With a sigh, I regripped the Nightbringer and telekinetically played a new tune. Penumbra's echo lit the purgatorial realm with its heavenly notes, and soon everything was blurring away, as if a cosmic hoof was wiping a chalkboard clean. The moans flew into obscurity, as did the moisture, the lightning, the chains, and the bone-chilling cold. The world settled into a gentle amber kiss, and I was once again sitting on my stool in the bottom of a cellar, surrounded by dirt walls and lantern light. The Nightbringer hung in my grasp. I looked at my moist toes as I cradled it. Not a single limb of mine was shivering. It made very little difference. With a defeated moan, I closed my eyes. 10 times, Al," I said, squatting in the center of the cabin as I tossed another wooden log into the fireplace. "I've played the first 8 elegies and taken myself to the unsung realm 10 times in a single week. And still, I can't get her to show herself." I threw in another log, sighing as it suffered a crackling fate amidst the burning embers. In a lethargic slump, I stretched my wet limbs toward the center of the tranquil furnace and warmed myself. Just what am I doing wrong? I mean, I have the Nightbringer. I have a piece of the same song that created her. Why can't she recognize that? Why can't she face me like a responsible goddess, so I can simply end this? Behind me was the sweetest sound in the whole world. A tiny orange thing was purring, his rumbling sounds punctuated by the crackling of dry food between his jaws as he patiently ate from his freshly filled bowl beside my cot. Tilting his head up, Al glanced at me with calm, amber eyes before returning to his food. The tabby's ears perked at attention, as if knowing I was only going to ramble on. Smart cat. "Maybe that's just it. Maybe she's just mad at me for having received the Nightbringer from Alabaster right under her nose." I sighed, and gazed up at the cool October evening from beyond the windows of my home. Maybe she's always been mad at the Cosmic Matriarch, and now that I've gotten a piece of her voice, she won't even give me the light of day. I chuckled bitterly. Or a chaotic day. Seriously, that stupid place could use a flashlight. I gave Al a goofy smile. The cat merely stared back at me, his whiskers twitching. Yeah, okay, that was lame. With a groan, I stood up and marched my rain-slick self towards the far side of the cabin. Still, 10 times in a row. And it's not like she's completely ignoring me. I mean, she appears in her huge spheroid throne every time to try and scare me away. Just what is that thing anyways? Was it a means of transportation for alicorns upon the dawn of creation? That would make some sense, right? I mean, she had to have been around as long as the Cosmic Matriarch was here on the planet, right? She couldn't be any older than Celestia, at the very least. I levitated a towel from a shelf, and dried my mane vigorously with it. As I dragged the rag to my wet shoulders and spine, repeating the motions I had gotten far too used to over the past week, I paused. I dropped the towel around me and looked Al's way through a disheveled mane. What if... What if that structure is part of the unsung prison? I gulped and gazed out the window yet again. And maybe this spirit does the same thing to her as the curse does to me. Maybe she's powerless to remember anything but her song. A shudder ran through me upon contemplating that. Blessed Luna, do I even have a chance of reaching her? Al's answer was to hop onto the cot, curl in the dead center, and proceed to lick himself. I exhaled. I dried the rest of my body before tossing the towel into a nearby hamper. Well, I murmured as I trotted across the light of the fireplace. Perhaps what I need to do is more studying. I sure have enough books checked out from Twilight's. I chuckled as I looked upon a huge stack of research manuscripts lying beside Al's food dish. At this rate, she and Spike will think that Diamond Dogs raided their archives overnight. I should return these soon. But still. I pivoted and stared at the source of an immense golden glow in my cabin. The Nightbringer stood on an end table, blessing this mortal icon with its timeless presence. It was a little bit alarming how easily I got used to seeing the holy artifact with my naked eyes. There are bigger things at stake here, I murmured. A frail smile crossed my lips. What do you think it'll be like, Al? The day I finally get her to play the duet with me. The day I finally end this curse. I turned to gaze softly towards him. Would Celeste and Luna be grateful to have me return their holy instrument to them? Al looked towards me, blinking sleepily. His ears twitched, and he shook his head into one of those prolonged, devilishly freakish yawns that only felines can pull off. I gazed at the floor as I trotted towards the bed. Curious thought, I murmured aloud as I levitated a brush and comb over to myself, along with one of the library books. The curse couldn't possibly be affecting her. I mean, she reached out to her sister when Luna osmotically learned about the Nocturne of the Firmaments, and transformed into Nightmare Moon those many years ago. I squatted in the crater of blankets beside Al, while brushing the tangles out of my mane. I flipped the page open and looked over several historical documents detailing candlelight music tradition. Also, there is her beloved. For Alabaster to have learned about the topic, she had to have been missing him, and thus had to be retaining memory of her beloved's banishment. I frowned slightly as I levitated another book towards me, then another. My amber eyes danced across the many pages in search for an answer. So I can't really imagine that she is forgetting me each time I visit the realm. But instead, she's just flat out ignoring me. But why? Does she think it's her job? Does she just want to break contact with any pony who's not willing to become her shackled slave? I felt a soft, furry body of warmth. I glanced down to see Al curling up against me, raising two playful paws to bat at the many floating objects. Blankly, I stared at the books, brush, comb, and other objects crowded on my side of the room. With a nervous chuckle, I lowered everything in place except for one book, which I propped up beside myself and now. Thanks. I know. I'm starting to overdo it again. A sigh escaped my lips as I looked up from the pages, and once again graced the Nightbringer's golden brilliance. Seems like I've gotten stronger overnight. I think whatever it was that kept Alabaster alive for so long is happening to me. I mean, I don't know about having long life, but I certainly feel stronger. I gulped nervously. And I know I wouldn't have lasted a second against her if I didn't have a piece of the holy song with me in the unsung realm. I squatted down and nuzzled out closely. But still, I murmured, I'd gladly give up all the strength in the world if it just means learning Dawn's Advent. If it just means finishing this blasted symphony. The cabin was silent, save for the crackling of embers in the fireplace. I felt warm, toasty, safe, anything but free. The powers of a goddess at my hooves, I muttered. And I still can't get a single alicorn to listen to me. I sighed and buried my face into the blankets. How will I ever receive an audience? Al mewed and rubbed up against me, purring. Limply, I smiled and nudged him back. I know, but of course, I've already got you, you fuzzhead. I giggled lightly and relished in his affectionate purr. I promise, if there's an encore, you're the first who's gonna hear it. I stared calmly into the haze of the far ends of the room. The sunset fell outside the windows, and the hush of evening lulled me into a reflective trance. Could you repeat that, dearie? Mommy asked with a gentle look of concern across her face. I don't know what our problem is. We're both absolutely fine. My new friend treads at the floor with her hooves. She avoids my parents' gaze. I don't understand why she's so shy. She's no more wet than I am. The storm is brewing outside our candlelit apartment. Maybe she's frightened by it. I don't know. I step through the puddle and stand in front of her, smiling. She bumped into something along the way here, I say with a proud smile. She might be clumsy, but I think she's okay. Isn't her mane pretty? I mean, I know it's tangled and all now, but just wait until it gets dry. She was telling me earlier how much she loves going to the salon with her mom. Can I go with them sometime? It's just a block away. And they don't live that far away from us. And we've been neighbors and we didn't even know it. Is that so? Daddy remarks. He glances across the way at Mommy. Mommy is already stepping forward. She gently pats my shoulder and makes me step aside as she kneels down in front of my brand new friend. Moondancer, was it? She slowly nods her head. Why is she so shy in front of them? She was chatting like crazy a second ago. She likes banana splits and practical jokes and sunny days at the beach and... Let me see your face, darling. Mommy says softly. She isn't angry at us. That's a relief. Why is she so curious about Moondancer's face? You don't have to be afraid, dear. I won't hurt you. I promise. Moondancer takes a deep breath. Her face is wet, even though we marched in from the rain minutes ago. She tilts her horn up and allows Mommy to see her twitching eye. My, that's quite a nasty bruise you got there. Mommy coos. She presses the side of Moondancer's face. The blueness on my new friend's skin is slightly larger than Mommy's hoof. Sweet Celestia. She turns and gives Daddy a pointed look. He's nodding for some reason. Grabbing a coat and an umbrella, he marches towards the door, passing just beside Mommy to whisper something into her ear. She nods and murmurs something back. I eventually hear, Don't go alone. Get Dusk to go with you. He should be home. I saw his and Stellar's son, Shining Armor, play in the courtyard this morning. Yes, I believe Dusk has dealt with Night Trap before. Don't worry, honey. We'll have the guard with us this time, Daddy says quietly. He casts me and Moondancer a brief smile. For some reason, it makes me feel nervous. He opens the door, shoots the umbrella open, and is gone in the storm. Before I can gaze out the window after him, Mommy is standing before us, and she also has that strange-looking smile. Moondancer, we're so glad to have you here to visit. It's a nasty storm outside, so we're going to let you stay here for the night. Moondancer's eyes flicker with bright violet, then blink. She fidgets, backtrotting and lowering her head as if part of the ceiling might fall on her. I don't think my dad will like that. Shh. Mommy talks to Moondancer in a gentle voice. It's like how she used to talk to me when I was just a little itty-bitty foal. We won't tell your dad unless you want us to. Her eyes are trained on Moondancer. Just like that, Moondancer responds. You can tell my mom. Mommy slowly nods. Your mother, Mm-hmm. Moondancer nods back, and she's trembling again. Only this time her eyes are bright and happy. Could she stay the night too? Mommy smiles gently. Don't you worry. Your mother can come here and stay as long as she likes as well. Woohoo! I jump, gasping for joy. The slumber party! I always wanted to have one. Ooh, I can show you my room. Daddy bought me all these amazing musical instruments. I'm gonna be in a band someday. Lyra, dear. Mommy chides gently. Moondancer needs to have some time to rest and relax. Calm down some. I, I. Moondancer bites her lip and squirms where she stands. I don't mind. I like Lyra. She's fun. See, Mommy? I hop in place, beaming. She likes me. She's my new best friend and we're gonna do fun stuff together. Mommy takes a breath before saying with a warm smile. Okay. Go on and show her your room. Just don't get too rowdy. It'll be bedtime soon. Okay. We won't be too loud, I promise. I tug Moondancer by the hoof and all but drag her into my room. Come on. You gotta see all the cool things I got for housewarming. Moondancer giggles. She makes such sweet sounds. I bet she's also going to have a talent in music. How lucky could we be? Maybe we'll both get matching cutie marks. I hear of ponies get their cutie marks at the same time. Maybe she can join my band when I grow up. Lucky. I bounce around my room, showing off my xylophone, my flute, my drum set. Isn't it neato? Now I can't figure out which I'm best at. I'm guessing it's the stuff my parents yell at me less for. Your parents yell at you? Moondancer murmurs. Only when I make too much noise. But, they got me these. So they must have wanted me to make some noise. Moondancer laughs until she's red in the face. I guess I never thought of that. I bet you'd be good at the trumpet. Oh, I'm good at the trumpet, all right, she says as an evil smirk crosses her lips. After I've eaten a whole bunch of Mexican fried beans. Ha! I shriek, bouncing away from her hiding behind a stuffed animal. Moondancer, how unladylike. She giggles and bounces towards me, waving her horn around. On guard, magical musician. Oh no! I feign horror and trot around to far lengths of my bedroom. She's an evil unicorn witch come to steal my super special talent. Help! Help! She giggles and chases me for a while. I'm still running in circles until I realize that I'm the only filly giggling. I stop and turn, panting. I see her staring at a wall full of pictures taken of me and my mom and dad. I trot over, smiling. Moondancer? What is it? Her smile is gone. Well, no, it's there. But it's a different kind of smile. She sniffles, but it doesn't look like she's crying. Your... your house. What about it? She gulps. It's really warm. I blink at her. A rumble of thunder echoes outside the window, and I shudder under the refracted light of rainwater. Oh, well, of course it is, Moondancer. I grin nervously. Why wouldn't it be? She stares into the shadows briefly, her eyes fluttering. Suddenly, just as quickly as she had stopped, she turns and charges at me, horn first while grinning. On guard! Arr! Ack! No fair! You cheated! Cheating cheater! Hem not! Heart two! Hem not! Heart two! Hem not! My eyes fluttered open. I shot up with a sharp breath, staring at the lonely links of my cabin. The fireplace had long died out. Al was lying asleep, curled up at my side, his soft orange body rising and falling. The world was black outside, but the faintest hint of dawn was creeping over the distant, forested horizon. It wasn't until the waves of cold assaulted my figure that I was finally brought back to the cursed present. I rubbed my forelimbs over each other, my teeth chattering. I realized it was a long time since warmth was anything but an illusion of my life. Lethargically, I gazed down at a book lying open before me, speaking endless drivel of forgotten candlelight songs into the dim air of the cabin. The first day I'm no longer cursed. I'm taking the longest nap in recorded history. I muttered as I daintily climbed over Al and crawled out of bed. Because it will be recorded, dang it. With a brief hiss, I slithered into my stone gray hoodie. Feeling comfortable enough, I reached for my lyre, slid it into my saddlebag, and strapped the thing to my shoulders. I made for the exit, but not without pausing. With a groan, I turned around and marched back towards the golden body of the Nightbringer. If I have the literal song of the cosmic matriarch in my possession, I might as well exercise her responsibilities. Al gave no response to my muttering voice. He slept soundly as I went through my new habitual task. I wrapped the priceless instrument in a pouch of regal velvet that I had ready produced for me at the cost of an entire bag of bits. Then, after rolling up a round carpet, I telekinetically pulled out a latch, opening the floor of the cabin to a rectangular enclosure I had carved out of the floor with magic the week before. Gently, I lowered the shrouded Nightbringer within, closed the trapdoor, and rolled the rug back over it. Finally, I was ready. Marching towards the cabin exit, I shifted the weight of my lyre across my back and pointed at Al. Don't you get any thieving ideas, you little scamp. The tabby yawned, rolled over, and purred towards the ceiling. With a creak of the front door, I was gone, marching out to greet the coming dawn with my thoughts. The brightness of morning accompanied my labored thoughts. Autumn was in full effect, and I could feel it in my bones. The arrival of October chased the residual heat of summer away. The dew on the blades of grass bending beneath me was positively freezing. In truth, I wasn't looking to feel comfortable. I needed to exercise the restless energy in my mind, and every jolt and chill of the autumnal morning assisted me in such a venture. The nature of my curse had made me a regular insomniac, some pun you would think. The fact of the matter is, I hadn't had trouble sleeping until just recently. Having unlocked the structure of the night elegy, I had every reason to feel proud of myself, as if I had made some priceless progress in my pursuit of freedom. Things couldn't be further from the truth. I was at an impasse. The ninth elegy turned out to be a duet, and there was only one soul in the history of everything that was eligible to carry me musically into the final, redeeming instrumental of the nocturne. How did I come to realize this? Twilight Sparkle knew nothing of Dawn's advent. None of Alabaster's journals describe the true nature of the song. Nowhere in the entire archives of Ponyville Library did I find a single listing of that title. As an experiment, I had several ponies perform Desolation's duet along with me, including Applejack with her fiddle, and Peaky Pie with her accordion. Nothing worked to get me any closer to my goal, and I was starting to understand why. The purpose of the Nocturne of the Firmaments was to seal an alicorn goddess away from the rest of reality. Who but the alicorn herself could possibly have been a better candidate to usher such a lonely prisoner through her unsung realm and back into the dimension of the living? I couldn't stop thinking about the spherical structure within which her spirit was housed. When I first entered the realm, when it was up to Alabaster to save my amnesiac self, she had approached me from up high, summoning her bolts of diabolical energy, as if I was any other lost soul flung into her domain. On the second visit, when I played the Threnody with a protection shield and entered her realm lucidly, she had approached me in person. I must have been an anomaly to her, having visited for a second time to grace her plane. Perhaps that was the first time she saw me as a threat, and for that reason, she had to tell me to my face that I needed to sing her song and become nothing. But now that I've returned, now that I have the Nightbringer, now that I am strong and virtually untouchable in her domain, she keeps herself at a distance. She purposely avoids coming into close contact with me. Do I frighten her? Does the fact that I know her secret and still walk this globe give her a sense of unease? What could one unicorn mortal have in her possession that could intimidate an undead alicorn lost unto time? Is it all the Nightbringer? Or is it something else? This is why I can't sleep. I don't know what's worse. Knowing that I was helpless from the beginning, or knowing that I made so much progress, only to become twice as helpless as when I first started. There was a time when playing music relaxed me. I've been trying to remember that, to incorporate that back into my life. These days, all I can find myself doing is playing the one tune that has brought me more joy and ease than any other tune in the grand history of my existence. Penumbra's Echo. I played it over and over again from where I sat on the edge of a meadow, beside a long brown path. I was close to the west edge of Ponyville. The sun was just then coming over the horizon. The birds sounded across the treetops, and their chirps got lost in the gentle melodies wafting off from my vibrating strings. I tried to imagine, if even for a brief moment, that I was just like any other pony living in that town. It must be a delightful feeling, to not be a ghost, to not have to worry about disappearing, to know that there are voices left on this earth that will say your name out loud. I don't even want to be popular. I don't even care if I have no more than 5, 4, or even 2 friends. I want my name to be spoken, whispered, laughed, sung, and even grumbled. With a deep breath, I closed my eyes and played the song at a slower tempo, allowing my heart to beat in between each plucked string, as if I was playing the faded duet with myself. It seems a bitter twist of irony that out of all the instrumentals of the Nocturne, the most important tune is the one I absolutely can't perform alone. After all, the tough part isn't performing the song. The challenge is to get her to agree to doing it with me. But how does one appeal to a timeless spirit imprisoned by oblivion? Who am I? I'm no goddess. I'm no... Oh my! A lyre! That's such beautiful music. Are... are you from Canterlot? I fluttered my eyes open. Before me stood several bright blurs in the dawnlight. A ruby coat, a fuchsia mane, and eyes of forest emerald. A smile broke out that I could illuminate the dew-laden world twice over. Oh please tell me you're from Canterlot. I, might be. I stammered under a breath of confusion. Clearing my throat, I nevertheless sat up from under the tree and smiled her way. Miss Cheerilee, I presume. Oh, I knew it! She hopped in place, nearly dropping a saddlebag full of graded papers. You came after all, and they claim that you were too sick to show up this week. Oh, I was so afraid of letting the students down. I chuckled nervously and stood up, shaking the morning moisture off my mane. I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage. Gulping, I leaned forward with a suspicious breath. Were you expecting me? Before she answered, I already knew that it was too good to be true. You are from Canterlot, aren't you? Cheerilee was nervously biting her lip. It was devastating to see the enthusiasm draining from her face. I've enjoyed several conversations with Ponyville's resident schoolteacher, and it's hard to come across another pony in all of Equestria who contains that much joy and yet so little annoyance. Oh dear. I hope I haven't jumped to conclusions. You see, I've been in constant communication with Princess Celestia's School for Gifted Unicorns, and Professor Blue Noise of the music department was hoping to assist me in setting up a music program for the little fools of Ponyville. Hey, Professor Blue Noise! I grinned wide. I know him. He taught me my senior year. I winced, already realizing that my excitement had forced me to say too much. What I mean is, so you're the one he sent? Cheerilee beamed, nearly leaning off her hooves. He had promised that one of his best pupils would arrive to give my students a dissertation on musical history. But the last letter said that you had fallen terribly ill and had to make a stop at Trottingham to recuperate. I figured that I'd have to change this week's study topic back to basic geometry yet again. Yes, well, math is math, I guess. I gulped, feeling my insides curling up, and not in the good way. It isn't often I fall into these bizarre niches of happenstance, but when they do happen, they're hardly anything but awkward occasions. Miss Cheerilee, I do happen to have quite a bit of musical expertise, but I fear that there's been a horrible misunderstanding. Oh? She tilted her head aside, blinking innocently. I was intrigued at how naive an instructor of fools could be. I suppose the world can never be too innocent. My heart went out to her, especially as she murmured, You're not the people of Professor Blue Noise after all? The one sent from Canterlot? Well, I am from Canterlot, but I winced at myself. What was I doing? I shouldn't have even been tempting the notion. Somewhere, someplace, some poor sap from my hometown was coughing his or her lungs out, and the last thing I should have been doing is contemplating taking the pony's place. Just because I was a ghost didn't give me license to play with false identity. But what else would I have been doing that morning? Sitting down? Moping? Philosophizing? True. If I tried to pass myself off as a history teacher to a bunch of Ponyvillian children, it would hardly have made a difference. They'd completely forget everything I told them by the time they got home. I would have essentially robbed Cheerilee in her classroom of an entire day's worth of studying far more important and permanent things. So what if I could have possibly informed, enlightened, and even brought a few smiles to a bunch of fools for one day, and one day only? But then I realized, the moment I skip out on any opportunity, no matter how insignificant, to bring happiness to other ponies' lives, then that means I would have given in to my curse. I would have let the likes of her win. And I don't care how many bleak circumstances I have to deal with in my pariah state. I'm not here in this town to watch the world crumble into misery. If I have a chance to spread sunshine, for even just a blink, then darn it, sign me up. However impulsive the notion, it made me smile, and I found myself standing up to look at Cheerilee eye to eye. You know what? There's no point in hiding it anymore. Professor Blue Noise promised to have those kids learn a thing or two, and who am I to let a silly case of the sniffles stop me from making that dream come true? You mean you're up for it? Shirley held back her smile as her cheeks burned up from the precipice of ecstasy. You're not too ill after all? I took a deep breath, sucking the autumnal crispness of early October in through my nostrils, and exhaling it out through a wide grin. That's the thing about this town. Just one morning walk can clear the body and the spirits. You know what I mean? And how? If Cheerilee suddenly sprouted Pegasus wings and floated around me, I wouldn't have been too shocked. Oh, the kids are absolutely going to love this. I've been prepping them on basic equestrian music theory for a week. Any knowledge you have to share concerning the pre-modern royal ballads would be absolutely stellar. Oh, well... I ran hoof through my mane before trotting down the morning lit path alongside her. I might know one or two. And the charade didn't stop until I finally got a chance to pull her foster mother, Milky White, aside and tell her about the whole issue. Cheerilee said as we strode up to the schoolyard in the early morning light. The sounds of giggling children and pattering hoofs lit our ears. The three of us had a sit down together, and the little darling got several things off her chest. Ever since then, Skidoodle's been a great deal more well adjusted, and she started forming close friendships with the other children. Why, she and two other foals are practically inseparable now. Wow. I shook my head in awe and smiled her way. I can't imagine how stressful that must have been. You mean you actually let the little Pegasus convince the entire class that you were her older sister? Mm-hmm. Cheerilee nodded with a smile. For a little while, at least. I later explained it off as Scootaloo pressing for our local play, and needing my help for acting lessons. Our sister charade is a fabrication of a fabrication, if you think about it. The little dear is dead set on performing on stage when she grows up, after all. In the end, I was able to give the filly a chance to exercise her emotional needs, without suffering the ridicule of peers, who wouldn't understand what she's been through before moving here. Ooh, it's a good thing I'm just a guest speaker for the day, I said with a nervous chuckle. I guess I never really imagined what teachers like you must deal with on a regular basis. But seriously, that was a genius move on your part. Ever thought of getting a psychiatry on the side, Miss Cheerilee? Oh, ho, 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 Miss Heartstrings, Cheerilee uttered with a giggle and a wave of her hoof. Please, you flatter me. Besides, I have too much of an affinity for gardening as it is. Why does that not surprise me? I replied with a smirk, as we came upon the yard. Whoa, hello there. I froze in place, blinking at a big red sight. A familiar stallion paced to a stop in the middle of the schoolyard, having given several giggling foals and colts a bareback ride. Upon seeing Cheerilee, Big Mac smiled and lowered to his knees, letting the various foals descend onto the lawn, upon which they proceeded to scamper up to Miss Cheerilee and dance in gay little circles around the teacher. Good morning, Miss Cheerilee. Big Mac gave us a ride around the school building. I want to be as big as him someday. Oh, yeah? My big brother is even larger than he is. Hey, tain't true. Big Mac is the biggest and strongest there ever was. Nuh-uh, Apple Bloom. Yeah-huh. Nuh-uh. Yeah-huh. Children, children. Cheerilee knelt down and parted Apple Bloom from a gold, giving her a raspberry. It's true. Big Macintosh is strong and dependable. But do you think he got that way by spending all this time bickering and fighting with other ponies his age? Not at all. He spent his full whole exercising and working hard to get where he is now. Now, why don't you take his example and be nice to one another? Because if you waste all your time with frowning, how will you be there for little fools when you're as old as he is? You're right, Miss Cheerilee. Apple Bloom, I'm sorry for being mean. It's okay, Spring Gaze. I ain't mad at you. You're not mad at him either, are you, Big Mac? Nope, the stallion said with a definitive shake of his head. The children giggled, then gazed up at me. Several of them gasped, and soon I found a veritable train swarming around me, as if I were a heartwarming tree. Ooh, ooh, a musician! Look at her cutie mark. Are you from Canterlot? Are we gonna learn about old songs and stuff? Do all unicorns from the Princess's City wear clothes like that? I fiddled where I stood, biting my lip. I seem to have gotten celebrity status already. Students, this is Miss Heartstrings, Cheerilee said to the fillies and colts gathered around us. Half of the schoolyards crowded formed a thick cluster of eager, bright, blinking faces. It was like a living lake of adorableness. I try not to develop cavities from the sheer sight of it. And you're right. She's here to teach us a thing or two about the history of equestrian musical development. I'd say we're in for a treat, so say hello to our special guest. Hello, Miss Heartstrings. The chant was positively electric. I waved back, feeling butterflies in my stomach. The cold tendrils of my curse were continents away all of a sudden. Back at ya, kitties. In the meantime, Cheerilee was turning to smile at Big Mac. Thank you so much, Macintosh, for playing chaperone for me this morning. I had to stop by the post office along the way here. You have no idea how much of a blessing this was to me. By the way, did you restock the firewood in the back? Yup. Wonderful, Cheerilee beamed, her cheeks red again. I wondered if she had a condition. That will come in handy during the winter to come. I can't thank your family enough. Yeah, I've, only been in this town for a little while, I said with a smirk in Big Mac's way. And I already get the feeling that Ponyville wouldn't survive long without the shoulders of the Apple family to lean on. Yeah, nope, Big Mac said with a teeth-glinting smirk. Cheerilee giggled again. Well, you can be on your merry way, Macintosh. I know you have a great deal of farm work to do. Alright, students. Just 10 minutes until class begins, and then Miss Heartstrings and I will be... She turned and gazed across the schoolyard, and instantly her smile waned. Oh, heaven help me. Not again, she muttered with a rolling of her eyes. I blinked curiously at that, but then I heard a squealing voice, followed by two grunting laughs. Turning, I looked over at the swing set to see two young unicorns on either side of a familiar gray Pegasus. The petite, winged colt was bouncing up and down, trying desperately to grab a ball being bounced out of its reach between the two bullies. I mean it, guys. Give it back, Rumble squeaked. He seemed no bigger than the day I saved him and Morning Dew from an imploding hotel building. His cheeks were red as he huffed, puffed, and blurred his wings in desperation for the lift that could help him grab the ball from his peers. This isn't funny. I don't know. I can't stop chuckling, a stout young unicorn rasped. His rough turquoise coat clashed with a scraggly orange mane and thick brown eyebrows, as he hubba the ball over Rumble's head and towards his lanky partner. What about you, Snails? Yeah, Snips. A ridiculously tall colt with a tan coat and lime green mane hair guffawed as he balanced the ball on several limbs and passed it back to Snips. This is funnier than one time you called Rumble a penguin, and he cried because penguins smell. Yeah, you remember that time, Rumble? Snips snickered and spun the ball on the top of his horn. Which was funnier, that or this? I don't care. Rumble stomped his hooves and pouted. Just give it back. Why do you want this stupid ball so much anyway? Snips grunted. It's not my ball. Now give it back, Rumble said, shifting nervously. It was then that I spotted a silky white filly, crouching shyly behind a sandbox a few trots away. It's okay, Rumble, Sweetabelle said, her cheeks red and her eyes moist. I don't want it back that badly. But it isn't fair, Rumble growled. They should give it back. Ah, what a knight in shining armor. Snips hissed with a raspy laugh as he dribbled the ball between his forelimbs. Is this your wedding gift for when you marry her? Huh? Rumble backtrotted, red as a beet. He looked over his shoulder. Sweetabelle was hiding her identically inflamed face. Snails rolled his eyes, grinning loosely. It's funny, because they both look like marshmallows. We do not, Rumble and Sweetabelle simultaneously chirped. Pfft, if you want to give her the ball so badly, here. Snips gave the thing a vicious buck. Catch! The spear bounced roughly off Rumble's pale forehead. Ow! Snips and Snails leaned into each other, cackling wildly. Just then, the shadow of Cheerilee hovered over them. They looked up and instantly paled. Ha, snap. Snips? Snails? Cheerilee's eyes were hard enough to cut glass, and they burrowed their way into the colt's guilty brows. When will you leave Rumble alone already? What has he ever done to you? Hey, we were just playing a little game, Snip said. After a beat, he bumped Snails in the side. Oh, Snails' mouth hung open. Before he could drool, he instead managed. Yeah, we were playing bounce the ball. Snips looked Rumble's away. It came across as a vicious glare. Isn't that right, Rumble? Rumble shyly dug his hoof into the ground, while Sweetabelle murmured something under her breath. Don't try fooling me, Cheerilee exclaimed, frowning even harder than before. This is the second time this week I've had to stop you from giving other classmates a hard time. Did you forget that talk we had last month? Do I need to speak to your parents again? Our parents? Snails blinked, as if the concept was new to him. Snips, however, was suddenly lucid. All traces of a mischievous frown left his body, as he cleared his throat and shook his head. No, Miss Cheerilee, ma'am. You don't have to talk to her parents or nothing. Yeah. Snails nodded, osmotically following his companion's example. We'll be good. You'd better. We have a guest speaker from Canrot here today, and I expect you two to be on your best behavior. Now sit on the bench for the rest of preschool recess. I don't want to see you on the playground for the rest of the morning. Ah, don't give me that tone. You're lucky I don't have you cleaning the blackboard again. One of these days, I'm finally going to teach you two some manners. She turned and trotted past me, heading straight for the school building. I do love my job, she said in a low voice, winking with a subtle smile. But it helps to be firm every once in a while. Yeah. I nodded and gave the two stolen colts a lasting glance, before staying in close proximity to the school teacher. I'd hate to see soft. And that's how the great General True Colt single-handedly defended the entire city of Old Shrinningham from an army of 100,000 lunar imperialists, without brandishing a single weapon, I said with a smile at the culmination of the tale. Unless you count a lute as a weapon. The entire classroom, full of bright eyes, cooed in wonderment. Any questions? I asked from where I squatted on a stool with my lyre. A filly raised a forelimb. Yes, you with the glasses. That was so spectacular. Did the general of the solar monarchy actually scare off an entire army with a single song? I did my best not to collapse into giggles. Darn, if she wasn't the cutest thing alive. Ahem. Yes, miss. I glanced Cheerilee's way. Cheerilee winked from her desk and mouthed the name. Miss Twist, I said, smiling in the filly's direction. You see, Chuko was a famous strategist, a master of his craft. The leader of the lunar army had battled with him on several occasions. So, when Chuko found himself in his meager allotment of forces surrounding Trottingham, he resorted to using history's most infamous bluff to save the entire population he was sent there to defend. In a way, you could say that it was all a matter of his reputation. I managed to wink, but I still chalk it up to the power of music. Ooh, ooh! Sweetbelle raised her hoof wildly. Yes, you, with the lavender mane. Sweetbelle blushed, and squirmed her front hoofs together as she shyly asked, What song did Chuko play when the enemy came to Trottingham? Why, funny you should ask that. He chose a folk tune from the Sorosians, who used to live in the Shadow District of Canterlot. Sorosians? Sweetbelle made a face. Cheerilee spoke up. They are a race of nocturnal ponies, predominantly Pegasi, with other wings and powers of echolocation, meaning they can hear things very easily in the dark, so that they can fly around at night. They served as Princess Luna's royal night guard before the civil war with Nightmare Moon began 1,000 years ago. Plus, I said with a warm chuckle, they have the most adorable ears. The classroom laughed lightly, all except for a pair of groaning colts. Could you play us the tune? Silver Spoon asked. If that's okay, Miss Heartstrings. Why, I would love to, I said with a smile and levitated the lyre in front of me. Forgive me if I'm a little bit rusty. The children sat on the edges of their seats. I closed my eyes, summoned the tune from memory, and played it as gently and calmly as I could. Ancient Sorosian tunes, as it so happens, are typically fast in tempo and a little grating to most ponies' ears. After all, it was made to be listened to by the likes of Alabaster and his fellow kin. Still, I think I managed to produce a tranquil interpretation of it. I marveled at how easy it was for me to translate the tune from the deep past of university study. I don't know if it was the act of performing the requiem so much each passing day, or if my constant use of the Nightbringer had heightened my senses, but I felt like my musical skill had increased exponentially in the span of a few weeks. I was no longer just any amateur musician. I was a unicorn blessed with a physically manifested song of the cosmic matriarch, and there I was sharing such enhanced gifts with a bunch of children. It felt right, in a way, as if I was doing something I was meant to do. When the tune ended, half of the group looked hypnotized, and the other half looked ready to bounce out of their desks. Like good little fools, though, they waited for Cheerilee's own outburst. Now, wasn't that spectacular? Let's give Miss Heartstrings a round of applause for such a wonderful rendition of an old classic. The children cheered and clapped their hoofs together. I smiled warmly, hugging the lyre to my chest. Perhaps all this adulation and learning would only last for a few minutes, or a few hours at most. But somehow, it didn't matter. I was feeling a piece of what I was struggling for. Recognition. One of these days, I promised myself, I would volunteer to teach ponies like these, and they would remember me forever, so that these smiles could resurface on their faces. One of these days. Around that time, an excited Rumble spoke up. That was very pretty. I liked it. Pfft. The voice of Snips grunted. Of course you'd like it, you fruitcake. Snail slapped his desktop and chuckled. He called him a cake of fruit. Why don't you serenade Sweetable with that, Casanova? Haha. Rumble bit his lip, his ears dripping across a shy face. A unicorn filly 2 chairs from him was hiding her blushing cheeks. Snips? Snails? Cheerilee stood up, practically growling. What? Snails and I like fruit. Isn't that right, Snails? Don't play dumb. That was very rude, to both Miss Heartstrings and Rumble, Cheerilee pointed. Snips, I expect an apology. This instant. Snips folded his forelimbs, rolling his eyes to the ceiling. I apologize for saying that, he muttered. Cheerilee glared. That didn't sound very sincere. What? I said I was sorry. Uh-huh. Cheerilee motioned towards the far end of the classroom. Over in the corner, Snips. Right now. I hate the corner. You heard me, young stallion. You've been given enough warnings today. He lurched slumpily towards a stool in the far edge of the room. Snails, the other corner. No dragging your hooves. Whee! The colt bounded towards the side of the classroom opposite of Snip's. I love dust. A few young ponies chuckled at two colts' expense. Cheerilee sat back at her desk, rubbing a sore head with her hoof. She looked towards me and managed a weak smile. Do continue, Miss Heartstrings. I apologize sincerely for the interruption. Hey, don't feel bad, I said with a nervous grin as I looked at the two delinquents with their flanks to me. What's a proper concert without its intermissions? More chuckles lit the room. Now, I cleared my throat and raised the lyre higher. Who would like to learn about the song written by Starscrew the Bearded to pacify the armada of sea serpents in the Age of Tempests? Ooh, tell us! Yeah, these serpents are super awesome. I concentrated as I strummed the strings of the lyre and prepared another melody. Remind me, are there any small rodents in the forest directly outside? This has been known to cause stampedes. That was absolutely marvelous, Miss Heartstrings, Cheerilee said in the afternoon air of the schoolyard. I couldn't agree more, I said with a breath of relief. Obviously, she was referring to the lessons I'd given the youngsters. Little did she know that I was simply thankful to still be having a sane conversation with her. How many hours had I been there? I couldn't tell anymore, but I had somehow managed to spend an entire session at the school without her forgetting about me. The chill in my curse was still there, and I witnessed at least a dozen fools giving me perplexed expressions. However, their teacher hadn't lost comprehension of me, and for that I was insanely thankful. It was the best possible day I couldn't have asked for. I just wish that they remember all of these lessons in the future. Oh, don't be so modest, Cheerilee stifled a giggle. You're positively unforgettable, Miss Heartstrings. Professor Blue Noise should be proud of your talents. Yeah, I stammered before gulping. Still, I kind of envy your job. Well, most of it at least. Yes. Cheerilee rolled her eyes slightly. Still, her smile came back as the two of us looked across the schoolyard. Several parents arrived in groups to walk their children home. We waved at Big Mac as he trotted off with Apple Bloom. Thunderlane flew skyward, with his little brother Rumble on his back. Milky Way escorted Skooloo down the path, along with Sweetie Belle. Rarity must have been busy with some project or another that afternoon. I do apologize for the actions of a few less than polite characters. Hey, we've all been there, I said in a dull tone before winking her way. Most of us. Don't tell me you were a problem filly when you were young. Not exactly. I fiddled with the sleeves of my hoodie, but I definitely grew up with one who became a Spitfire when she hit her teen years. You make it sound like they were sweet memories. A little jarring in places, but ultimately happy, I said with a nod. We are the sum of our parts, for better or for worse, I added in a low tone. I thought of Alabaster, of her, of all the elements, both horrifying and glorious, that had brought me to such a place of understanding and comprehension that day. There was still a duet to perform. One last hurdle. Was I prepared for all the challenges that entailed? I'm learning to accept the bumps of the past for smoothing out the future. I can't be too harsh on other ponies for figuring out their own places, no matter how clumsily. Well, some of us have to be stern in order to help them in the process, Cheerilee said. She shifted on her hooves and began walking away. If you would excuse me, Miss Heartstrings, there's a pony I've been meaning to talk to. Sure, I said, blinking. I watched as he approached a tall, rugged stallion. He was a unicorn, pale in complexion, with a tangled brown mane and a 5 o'clock shadow across his muzzle. The stallion was well built, brandishing a jackhammer for a cutie mark, and I could see the stains of sweat and dust on his forelimbs, indicative of a hard day's work. I guessed that he must have been a construction pony, or perhaps a paver of sidewalks. Must be a blue bridle job, I muttered to myself with a smirk. I contemplated walking over to join him, when a tiny shape wandered into my cloud of thought. Dumb colt, Snips grumbled. His eyes trained on the grassy floor of the schoolyard as he waddled in my general direction. Go home by yourself, Snails. Try and have fun at your lonesome. See if I care. Blindly, he bumped into my side and fell on his haunches. Oof! He rubbed his horn and squinted up at me. Oh, sorry about that. Hey, I remarked with a proud grin. Looks like you're not without manners after all. He blinked, his face blank. Do I know you, miss? Oh, I fidgeted, shifting the weight of the lyre in my saddlebag. I... I guess you don't. Uh, you're not Stales's mom, are you? No, I said in a calm voice. I assure you, I am definitely not Snails' mother. 'Cause he went home without telling me. Pfft, stupid colt. His life is dull as mud without me. Fascinating, I muttered. I hesitated briefly, cleared my throat, and squinted down at him. Could I ask you something? He shrugged. Sure, I'm not afraid of strangers. Cute, I smiled gently. Why are you so... So what? I just spat it out. Why are you so mean to other kids your age? Mean? You know, calling snails stupid, saying that Rumble's a fruitcake, stealing Sweetabelle's toy ball. Snips kicked at the ground, waving his messy orange mane. You saw that? Oh, she was practically whimpering me that silly thing back. You enjoy being cruel? Oh, please. Snips rolled his eyes, and it was then that I noticed something curious about his face. It's their fault that they're such wusses. They could definitely learn a thing or two from me. Heh. Uh-huh. I was staring at him. He gave me a weird face. What are you looking at? How... I leaned my gaze aside. How did your eye end up like that? The gruff exterior of the cult melted in an instant. He tilted his head in a way that's instinctual for unicorns such as ourselves. He must have thought that the shadow of his horn would hide the blue discoloration around his left eye. He was wrong. I bumped into something today at recess. I gazed fixedly at him. Eventually, I muttered, You don't say. He shrugged, picking at the grass with his hooves. It's no big deal. You sure? I remarked softly, reaching a gentle hoof towards his skull. It looks like it must sting. I'm fine, okay? He suddenly snarled, batting my hoof away. His teeth showed as he squawked. Snails is a big clumsy moron, and he runs into me a lot. That's all. Just then, a deep voice resonated from across the schoolyard. Snips? Come here, son. Snips instantly paled. His eyes twitched and he stood tall. Gotta go, he remarked hoarsely. He trotted off, but not without adding. Sorry to have bothered you, miss. It's fine, I stammered, gazing curiously as he trotted off. The schoolyard had almost entirely emptied of students. There was no pony in his way, as he shuffled limply towards the tall shadow of a stallion looming before him. After a few seconds of staring, I realized I was the unicorn adult with whom Cheerilee trotted off to speak to a few moments ago. The young and old ponies were too far away for me to hear them, but I could tell it wasn't a pleasant conversation that they were having, at least where Snips was concerned. The stout colt had his head bowed, at least until the stomping of his father's hoof forced the young one to look up, trembling. My eyes wandered up to the stallion's grizzled face. The unicorn was frowning. It was a very stern expression, but I couldn't help but detect something akin to dizzy wariness to the glare in his eyes. Suddenly, his horn was glowing. I couldn't tell why at first, but then I looked down to see Snips standing up on his hindquarters. Only, Snips wasn't standing. I saw his forward limbs twitching and curling awkwardly in the air. His height wobbled precariously on his haunches. I was shocked that he wasn't toppling over within the first 10 seconds, until I saw how hard his nostrils were flaring. For a moment there, it looked as though his face was taking on a blue complexion. With a jerk, he was suddenly standing on all fours yet again, panting heavily. My eyes traveled up to see the stallion's horn was no longer glowing. Frowning, Snips's father stomped down the path, motioning firmly for the colt to follow him. Limply, Snips obeyed. My lips pursed. I was about to say something out loud, when Cheerilee's smiling face was suddenly occupying my vision. Oh, hello, miss. Are you looking for some pony? Did... I squinted past her and pointed at the two figures trotting away. Did you just see that? Huh? She blinked quizzically at me. See what, ma'am? That, just now, between Snips and that stallion. Cheerilee glanced over her shoulder, only barely catching a glimpse of the two figures marching off. Huh? She looked back towards me. Are you a member of the Edge family? Is that the stallion's surname? Cheerilee. I think that. I froze. I looked at her. She gave me an innocent smile. I'm sorry. Have we met? I took a deep breath. I gazed over at the distant curve of the path. If you'll, excuse me. I trotted slowly, quietly through the heart of town. My hooves moved like water, following the wake of the two ponies ahead of me. With calm breaths, I trailed Snips and the older unicorn. I passed by familiar sights and sounds. I heard Rarity's airy voice as she chatted with Fluttershy. I smelled the burning embers of Spike's flaming breath. I heard music wafting out of Shigub Corner, and tasted the scent of baked candies from Bonbon's house. I ignored all these sensations of Ponyville, instead honing my vision on the father and colt ahead of me. Their march was a somber thing, like a funeral procession for a dead pony that no one knew about. They moved in a sluggish fashion, the elder swaying a little bit, grumbling indiscernible things to himself. Snips made no attempt to branch off from the path, and instead he paced like a melting glacier after the unicorn, his head bowed, his breast even. All of the spunk and vigor of the young schoolyard bully was gone. If I didn't know better, I would have imagined the little creature incapable of smiling. Eventually, they made it to the heart of Ponyville. A series of two-story condominiums lingered 2 blocks away from downtown. The gardens and lawns were colorful and well-kept, all except for one. To the front door of this house, the stallion trudged. He fumbled magically with a set of keys, and eventually opened the door. With a dull grunt, he turned and glared at Snips. The colt's limbs sprung into action, and he bolted out of his lethargic slump, desperate to enter the household as swiftly as possible. From a far glance, 2 mares could be seen inside, and they looked just as dead and unenthusiastic as Snips did that very moment. Then, everything disappeared as the stallion stomped into the house, wiped his hooves on the mat, and slammed the door shut behind him. I was standing behind a tree on the opposite end of the street. I made sure no pony was looking before resuming my constant study of the household before me. For several minutes I sat there, looking for anything. The place was eerily still. The sun was beginning to set. With a weary breath, I finally tore my gaze from the house, turned around, and carried myself towards the north edge of town. Then there was a rattling sound, followed by what sounded like a muffled yell. I spun around. I looked at the house, my eyes squinting at the windows. A light remained on for the space of 10 seconds, and then went out. Everything was still once again. All I could feel was the steady thuds of my heart beating heavily. Gulping a dry lump down my throat, I hesitantly turned from the sight and headed for the cabin. It's dark, and I'm so very thirsty. Why does it have to be so hot this time of year? This isn't Dream Valley. Candle is up in the mountains. Can't the princess make things cooler? She's in charge of the sun, after all. Ugh, thirsty. I kick the covers off of me, yawning, rubbing my eyes. I slide out of bed. I gently step over Moondancer's cot. After 2 weeks, I've gotten used to her lying in the middle of the room. I don't know how she can sleep so soundly. Every night, I'm tossing and turning, and yet she's still as a rock. Maybe she wears herself out in the daytime. She's very good at playing hide and seek. She can outrace me, and I've even seen her float 3 feet off the ground with magic. I'd never tell her, but I'm super crazy jealous of her talents. Anyways, water, 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 water. I open the door to my room and walk out into the dimly lit hallways of the apartment. I can't stop yawning. Why is it that as soon as I'm out of bed is when I start wanting to go back under the covers? Sleep is so weird. I haven't had any cool dreams since Moondancer showed up. Maybe that's why she's sleeping so well. She stole all the dreams. I wouldn't put it past her. I swear, she's like a wolf in pony's clothing. What's going on here? I see a bunch of ponies in the living room. There's Mommy and Daddy, and there's Moondancer's mom. Isn't she supposed to be asleep on the couch? How can she get any shut-eye with so many ponies sitting around? And just who are they? Wait, I recognize 2 of them. I think their names are Dusk and Stellar. They live across the street with 2 kids. One's an egghead who never shows her face. The other's a blue-haired colt that Moondancer always blushes upon seeing. What are they talking about anyways? I'm just glad that I can enjoy nights without having to worry about Moondancer's safety. I can't thank you enough for everything. If only I'd done something sooner. Don't blame yourself, Satin. You've dealt with so much as it is. What's important is that you told the guard the truth. They have what they need now to put Nitrat where he belongs. I I just feel so horrible. I feel like I should have reached out to him sooner. Hey, Satin, look at us. Don't sympathize with him. He's been feeding you lies all this time, taking advantage of your good nature. And besides, there's no helping ponies who refuse to help themselves. I can't believe that it came to this. He was so happy when we met, so peaceful. What happened to him? I wish I could put my hoof on it, but every time I think about it, I can only remember how far I dragged Moondancer with me. Oh, sweet Celestia, what have I done? Shh, Satin. What's important is that you've let us help you now. You're safe, and so is Moondancer. And now all I'm doing is taking up space in this house and... Hey, our house is your house. We're going to see you through this. And when the court is done analyzing the situation, we'll fight for your own property back. But... But Nighttrot, it's your house, Satin. Yours and Moondancer's. You've earned it, not him. Don't even doubt that for a second. Blearily, I blink and shuffle into the living room. I don't get it. Is it Moondancer's birthday or something? Is she getting a new house? All of the adult faces swivel to face me. Mommy speaks, and it's really stern. Lyra? Lyra Heartstrings, what are you doing out of bed? I was thirsty. I look nervously at all the ponies. Is something wrong? I turn and look at Moondancer's mom. Mrs. Satin, why are you crying? Mommy hugs the old mare as she takes a deep breath and smiles calmly at me. We're having a little talk, Lyra darling, between grown-ups. She looks at Daddy. Honey, would you? Daddy is already standing up, shuffling towards me. Come along, princess. It's not time for walking around the house. But, but, but I just wanted... I've got you some water right here. He levitates a cup across the nearby kitchen, fills it, and hands it to me. As I take a sip, he kneels down in front of me and places two hooves on my shoulder. You know that Moondancer and her mom are staying with us for a while, right? Mm-hmm. I nod. I feel nervous. My eyes are staring at the carpet. Well, they need our help right now. Mommy and I are doing our best to take care of Mrs. Satin. In the meantime, you keep taking care of Moondancer, huh? What do you say? She's not a doll, Daddy, I say with a pout. How am I taking care of her? You're being her friend, darling. But I like being her friend. He smiles gently. That's what makes it so wonderful. She needs you right now, and we all know how much you like hanging out with her. Just keep being a sweet, good filly to her. Mrs. Satin is telling me how happy Moondancer is now that she's got you to share time with. Really? You bet, princess. Done with your water? Uh-huh. He smiles and runs a hoof through my mane. Think you can sleep now? I smile softly. Mm-hmm. He leans over and kisses my forehead. There's a good girl. You need your rest for school tomorrow. I frown. We're going to learn about frogs. Well, how better to avoid warts? He swivels me around to face my bedroom door and gives me a final pat on my head. I'll see you in the morning. Good night, Daddy. Good night, Lyra. I enter my room and close the door behind me. I trot towards my bed. I stop in my tracks, blinking. Something is wrong. The cot is empty. What's more, I hear a quiet sound from the far edge of the room. Curious, I crane my neck to see. It's coming from the closet. I shuffle over and slide the door open. Moondancer's inside, squatting in the middle of my stuffed animals. She's hugging herself. Moondancer? I squint at her. Are you crying? She says nothing. She usually isn't like this. The last time I saw her shed tears was back when she first showed up at my apartment stairwell in the rain. Moondancer, what's wrong? I sit down and look at her closely. You're my friend. You should be happy. She sniffles. She peeks up at me from behind her forelimbs and murmurs. I don't want to go away. Huh? My face scrunches up. Go away? She shudders, gulps and stammers. They're talking about leaving, aren't they? They want Mommy and me to leave. I don't want to leave. I smile. Moondancer, You aren't leaving. You're staying here even longer. She sniffles and squints mistily at me. Oh, we are? Mm-hmm. I nod. I just heard them, I say in a hushed tone, leaning forward. My mom and dad want you to stay. So do Mr. Dusk and Mrs. Stellar from across the street. You're not going anywhere. Moondancer nods slowly, her breath coming out in tiny little gasps. I squirm where I sit. My eyes fall to the floor between us. Was it a bad dream? She shakes her head, the tears still falling. No, she says. I don't know what to say. But she sniffles again and looks at me. If I said that it was, would you stay here with me? I blink. I slowly smile. Daddy says that I'm supposed to be your friend. He does? Yeah. It's kind of funny, 'cause I already like being your friend so much already. She giggles slightly, her face cracking a smile. Okay. I look at her. I don't know why, but I feel like I found my special talent. I slide over and hug her. I don't care if it's silly for two little fillies to be hiding in a closet. I don't want her to be alone. Don't worry, I say as I nuzzle her. You don't have to worry about bad dreams around me, Moondancer. She whimpers something and leans into me. Her limbs feel cold. I feel bad for her, and yet happy that she's here all the same. I'm glad that I met you, Lyra. I'm glad that you met me too. And we both giggle. Her sobs eventually stop. One of us falls asleep before the other. I can't tell who. I sat on the edge of my cot, restless, petting Al's purring body as he lay curled in my lap. His fur was the only source of warmth in a grand ocean of cold. I took a deep breath and gazed up out the windows. The morning sun was rising again. Another October night, and I had barely slept a wink. With a deep breath, I stared at the contents of the cabin. I looked at the mountains of books pilfered from Ponyville Library. I glanced at the dozens upon dozens of tomes still left for me to read, and perused in my endless quest of pursuing a duet with the unsung goddess. I turned and gazed at the golden brilliance of the Nightbringer, a little piece of creation standing within the confines of my mortal abode. There were so many roads to freedom, all of them twisting and turning crazily into one another, forming a labyrinth of frigid madness and desperation. Half of the time, I wonder what's the biggest thing to solve. The problem that brought me there, or the problems that only a ghost like me is capable of seeing in the first place. With a deep sigh, I moved out to the center of the cot, stood up, and reached for my hoodie. We have a special guest for you today, students. Cheerilee beamed as she paced before the classroom gawking, blinking fools. As it turns out, our speaker from Camelot showed up after all. I know you've all been eager to learn about Equestrian music history, so give a warm welcome to Professor Blue Noise's prize student, Miss Lyra Heartstrings. The crowd of youths politely applauded and stomped their hooves, as I took center stage and sat on the stool. Well, hello there. Feels like only yesterday that I was sharing my knowledge with an eager group of youngsters just like yourselves. And believe me, it only gets more and more special every time. What is that? Diamond Tiara asked, squinting at my golden instrument. This, I said while levitating for all to see, is a lyre. It's one of the oldest instruments in equestrian civilization. In fact, many scholars believe the Holy Nightbringer itself was likened unto a lyre or a harp. I smiled Cheerilee's way. The teacher winked and spoke to the class. Remember our lesson on the creation tale 2 weeks ago? The fools murmured and nodded in understanding. The world began with a song, I said, breathing evenly as I presented a variation of the previous day's lecture. Because of that, whenever we sing, or express ourselves musically, we are, in essence, getting in touch with creation itself. It's not enough to acknowledge the rhythm of our heartbeats. No, my little ponies. I smiled. There are songs older than time, for they define the ages. They define us. What's more, we discover the lost parts of ourselves as we explore the creative spaces available to equine expression. It's worked for equestrian culture over the grand course of history, as I shall demonstrate to you, and it can very well work for our futures. Each and every one of you has a fantastic destiny to fulfill, and I would like to show you how to get in touch with it. Like everything, it starts in the past. Snips grumbled as he leaned his chin against a board hoof. History through music. This'll be as thrilling as watching paint dry. Snails laughed, as did a few other students. Cheerilee frowned. She looked ready to stand up and snap at Snips. Well, why don't you share with us your favorite kind of music, Snips? I interjected. Surely it can't all be boring. He blinked, as if caught in an enormous spotlight. You know my name? Cheerilee was squinting at me. You know his name? I merely chuckled and continued. Don't be shy, Snips. Tell us all your favorite kind of music. You might not think it's relevant, but I'll show you that it is. He fidgeted slightly, tapping his hooves at the end of his desk. I always like pony punk, I guess. A couple of ponies cheered. Scootaloo smirked. Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon rolled their eyes. Sweetbelle merely blinked. Pony punk, pony punk. I tongued the inside of my cheek, thinking hard. Ah, I think I know something close to it. I cracked my limbs, flexed my telekinetic muscle, and strummed the lyre with golden flashes of energy. The air filled with heavy thrashing, melodic and chaotic all at once. Several ponies' jaws dropped, the most dramatic of which was Snips. When the swift, psychotic, and altogether vicious tune was over, I sat back on my stool in a slump, as if trying to catch my breath. Whew, and I thought I was out of practice. That... Scootaloo stammered. I had no idea you could do that with a harp. Liar, Applebloom corrected with a hiss. Whatever. Well, Cheerilee shuffled nervously at her desk. That was certainly the, most interesting rendition of the Griffin National Anthem I've ever heard. Way to go. I grinned at Cheerilee and nodded. It most certainly was the Griffin National Anthem, albeit it's not the type you'll likely hear at the next Equestrian Olympics. I turned and grinned at the crowd. You see, there's been a counterculture movement in the Griffin Kingdom as of late. With shifting power structures between the old religious oligarchy and the new democratic union, several younger generations of Griffins have sought an outlet to express themselves. Thus, they took many classical songs and turned them into harsh, passionate renditions with fast tempo and heavy percussion. Thus began punk, a Griffin invention. This movement has been very popular over the last 30 years or so, and its influence has spread to Equestria, where several famous artists have developed, I smiled, pony punk, which is a slight variation. I turned to look at Snips. I assume you've heard of Philly Talent? Several colts snickered and nodded amongst themselves. Snips, his jaw still agape, produced a bright smile. Yeah, I've heard of him. Cheerilee looked at the class, at me, and at the class again. I smiled, leaning back. Now, go back in time to several hundreds of years ago, and there were similar movements in Equestria at the time of the Great Civil War between the Lunar Empire and the Celestial Monarchy. Granted, they didn't produce something like pony punk, but the symphonies born from such turbulent periods were considered fresh and shocking for their time. How would you like to learn some of these tunes? It'll be like time travel. Imagine if a few centuries from now, ponies decide to perform pony punk. Wouldn't they be getting in touch with our generation? Music is very much a part of us, you see. It's a part of who we are, who we've been, and who we will be. As we explore songs, we explore ourselves. How can it be anything but fun? Several of the ponies were on the edge of their seats at this moment. Many murmured with excitement, others squirmed in anticipation. All the while, I had Snips's avid attention, and he had mine. Well, for starters, I licked my hoof and strummed a few melodic strings of the lyre. Let's learn a little something about a stallion from olden times, named Full Trot. I stood on the edge of the playground, a few feet away from Cheerilee. I was strumming on the lyre while the foals ran in circles, enjoying the warm noon sun as recess occupied the middle of the October day. Slow down, Twist, Cheerilee called out from where she was grading papers at a picnic table. Remember how you sprained your ankle last month? You promised your parents that you'd take it easy on the jungle gym. A lisping voice acknowledged Cheerilee's warning, and the giggles from the playground doubled. Cheerilee smiled, scribbled a few marks on a sheet with red pen, and looked my way. I can't thank you enough for showing up this morning, Miss Heartstrings. I had expected a simple review of music history, but today you had the entire classroom riveted. You should take up teaching more often. Yes, well, I murmured amid strum. I guess you could say I had some practice for today's lesson. I winked her way. Expect nothing less from one of Professor Blue Noise's own, huh? Absolutely. Cheerilee crossed her forelimbs and smiled. The equestrian education system could use more ponies with the ability to push the foal's level of thinking and expression. She bore a bashful grin as she graded another sheet. I've always been told that I carry the permanent personality of a young filly. I figure it's my special talent's way of allowing me to relate with those who are blooming in the discovery of life, learning, and everything in between. I find that happiness is just as infectious as knowledge. Yeah, I think I get it. I plucked a few more strings and glanced at her. That reminds me, about the foals here. Yes? I've been meaning to ask you something. My voice lingered as I blinked at a sight waddling up towards us. Oh, hello there, Snips. How can I help you? Hi there, Miss Heartstrings, ma'am. I blinked, smiling curiously. You remember my name? But of course he does, Cheerilee remarked, giving me an appreciative wink. He knows a thing or two about being polite. Ahem. Isn't that right, Snips? Yes. Yes, ma'am. I glanced at the playground. Snail was on the far side of the schoolyard, playing a game of Foursquare with Scootaloo, Rumble, and Featherweight. It occurred to me that Snips must have not left my proximity for the last 2 hours at least. Something must have been distracting him. In a way, it felt like part of my mission had been accomplished. Is there something on your mind, young sir? I asked, using the pretentious candlelit voice which I had addressed the schoolroom for most of the day's lecture. The, the way you played Pony Punk earlier at that Lyra thingamajig was really awesome, Snip said with a joyful hop. I never expected to hear that at school, much less in Ponyville at all. Yes, well, Cheerilee interjected with a playful wink. Don't get used to it, Snips. You can listen to that at home, but from now on, expect to hear classical music or easy listening tapes at best. I don't think the Ponyville Education Headmaster would appreciate heavy Griffin thrashing on a regular basis. Snips bit his lip and dug a hoof through the grass. I don't think I'll ever hear any of that at home. I stared carefully at him. The bruise around his eye had mostly faded. This time, I couldn't help but notice what looked like a nasty bump on his skull, just to the left of his scraggy orange mane. Ignoring the heavy spike in my heartbeat, I asked, Does your family not like music, Snips? I wouldn't know. Oh, I remarked. Nah. He shook his head, his eyes gazing with a blank expression towards the woods bordering the schoolyard. I tilted my head to the side. You trotted all the way here, just to say nah? I took a deep breath. Snips, is there something you would like to tell us? He squirmed slightly, his head lifted up. Yeah, sure. My ears twitched. What is it, young sir? He blinked, then smiled. That's some really pretty music you're playing, Miss Heartstrings. My spirit plummeted and rejoiced all at once. With a gentle sigh, I grinned his way and nodded. I'm a major fan of it myself. I play it all the time when I can. Would you like to give it a listen? Sure. It's not Pony Punk, though. He choked and then sat on his portly haunches. I don't mind. I'd like to hear it. Very well, then. Here goes. I played the tune in full. It had a delightful melody, sweet and lulling and altogether devoid of sharp tempo shifts. There was a melancholic tone to the ballad, but the passionate edge in the plucked strings made the entire piece undeniably triumphant. When I finished, even Cheerilee was wowed. I heard her who's clapping lightly at the picnic table beside me. Bravo, bravo! She managed a slight chuckle. That was absolutely splendid. May I ask what it's called? I took a deep breath and said, Penumbra's Echo, and it's a tune that is near and dear to my heart. Whenever I feel down, or whenever my life is at a confusing crossroads, I know I can play this song and make everything feel all right again. It certainly is, Snips murmured, his eyes blinking as if they were seeing downhill from the two adults above him. Relaxing. I looked calmly at him, my hips gently gripping the lyre. Do you feel as though your life could use more relaxation, Snips? His nostrils flared. With a brief creasing of his brow, he stood up straight and mumbled. Nah, He shuddered and turned to leave. I was just bored, I guess. It helps me when I'm bored too, I said. I watched as Snips froze in place. I continued. Or when I'm sad, or dull, or tired. It doesn't matter what words I use to describe it. All I know is, music makes me feel better. It's a part of who we all are, just like I said earlier today. And if there's one immortal truth to Pony Snips, it's that we all deserve to be happy. We shouldn't let any pony tell us different, no matter how big or important they might seem in our lives. Slowly, he turned around. He looked up at me with a vulnerable expression. You really think so? I nodded. I know so. He seemed ready to say something, but his jaw clenched tight at the last second. He fidgeted, stuck between staying and going. After a few seconds went by, we both heard Cheerilee's happy voice. You've been a very polite young colt today, Snips, she said. I didn't have to stop you from bothering Rumble or any of the other ponies. Not even once. I'm proud of you. He smiled nervously, his stubby little tail flicking. Okay. Keep it up, and I'm sure your parents will be proud of you too. His smile waned, but he gave us a calm nod regardless. Yeah, sure. Thanks for the song, Miss Heartstrings. Don't mention it. Snips trotted off. A slight chill filled the air, and I shuddered to think that I might never get a chance to reach that vulnerable side of him ever again. I wasn't just blowing hot air, you know, Cheerilee said. Oh, perish the thought, I smirked. He's been quite the hoofball since he transferred here, she continued. His heart is brimming with excitement and yearning and curiosity, and yet it's prone to mischief and troublemaking all the same. Snips can be endearing when he wants to be, but more often than not the colt is a little sadist, and I'm constantly have to keep him and his buddy snails in check, or else they might hurt the feelings of the school fillies around them, or even worse. Seems like there's always bad apples in a bushel, I muttered. It presents a challenge, for sure, Shirley said with a nod. But I won't let these youths go sour, so long as I'm watching over them. I just wish Snips wouldn't pick on Rumble so much. Snails doesn't know any better. He just thinks it's a big game. You suppose Snips thinks it's a big game too? I said, looking towards her. As in, a way to distract himself from things he'd rather not think about? How do you mean? Well, I took a deep breath, looking towards where the stout unicorn had walked off. I can't be the only one who's noticed somewhat glaring injuries on his person. Cheerilee nodded. He and Snails live quite the rough and tumble lifestyle, Miss Heartstrings. Oh, no doubt, I looked at her. Colts will be colts, but what if it's more? Cheerilee took a deep breath, and for once her smile was lacking. You mean to suppose that there's another reason for the occasional bruise he shows up to class with? Wouldn't you think as much? I asked. I mean, I'm not around kids as often as you are, but the little dude's rough around the edges. He picks on other classmates. He gets all shy when he tries to express the tiniest of sincere emotions about music. I leaned towards her and said in a quiet voice, What if things aren't so peaceful around his home? Maybe the reason he doesn't get along with other students is that he can't form a connection with his folks. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think that myself, Cheerilee said in a calm voice. But teachers twice my age with well-established careers have had their jobs stripped from them for acting on such assumptions, only to be completely incorrect. Oh, well, I blushed, fidgeting where I stood. Yeesh, that's gotta be a tough call to make. I care for all of my students, from the bottom of my heart, Cheerilee said. Taking care of so many of them at once is indeed quite the juggling act. It's easy to read too much in between the lines, she remarked. This was followed by a nervous gulp. Or too little. You know anything about Snips's parents? I've met his father on a few occasions. Oh yeah? I looked towards her, my ears twitching. What's he like? Mr. Straight Edge is his name, Shirley remarked. He works in construction around Ponyville. He's a model citizen, if you ask me. Does that come with a model personality? Shirley chewed on the corner of her mouth. I stared at her patiently. She sighed and gave me a tired smile. There's a reason why I went into teaching, and not into psychiatry. Besides the fact that a cutie mark of smiling, blooming flowers goes horrible with ink blots. I think you're a decent enough judge of character. What's your opinion of him? He's worked all his life doing rough, menial labor, she said. And, as a result, he strikes me as a simple, rough style and he's more equipped for dealing with machinery than with anything else. And how does he deal with the fact that his own son is quite often a delinquent in school? I asked, thinking about the little meeting Shirley had with the stallion that previous day. Surely you've talked to him about it. He deals as calmly and dispassionately as most stallions do with such information, Cheerilee said. And Snips's mother? I asked. Or does she never show up for any parent-teacher conferences? Cheerilee slowly shook her head. No, I can't say that I've ever had the grace of seeing her since the family first showed up in town. Don't you find that a little strange? What intrigues me, Miss Heartstrings, Cheerilee remarked, is your avid interest in the matter. Is there something you know that I don't? Because, by all means, if there's a chance to get in better touch with Snips's parents, I would be happy to do so. Actually, I put my Lyra away in my saddlebag and turned to look directly at her. I was hoping that a moment like this would present itself. As a matter of fact, an entire day's worth of planning was about to go into the next few seconds. It's funny that you should ask that. When Professor Blunoy sent me here to be a guest speaker, I decided to stay with a distant cousin of a friend of mine. She owns a condominium bordering downtown Ponyville. Oh, I'm quite familiar with the district. Well, I've had the hardest time sleeping since I came here. Oh? Yes. I took a deep breath. I could have sworn I heard noises, like... My eyes traced the edges of their sockets, as I recalled the sound from Snizz's family household the previous day. Like muffled shouts through the walls. I've lived in apartments before, Miss Cheerilee. I think I know the telltale sign of domestic troubles when I hear it. Well, when I left the condominium this morning, I saw a colt marching out of the dwelling beside where I had stayed. I simply looked at her. Cheerilee slowly nodded. No wonder you've endeavored to reach out to Snips. That must have weighed heavily on you all day. I believe things are anything but peaceful at his home, I said. For once, it was the honestest Celestia truth. I'm, not quite sure what to do about it. Well, in all fairness, Miss Heartstrings, I'm not sure there's anything that can be done about it either. My heart sank. You really feel that way? It's not about feeling, so much as it is about thinking. She folded shut her notebook full of half-graded papers. We have to keep in mind that any terrible suspicion is unsubstantiated unless provided with a modicum of decent evidence. I winced visibly. Yeah, and I'm the last unicorn who would want to endanger your job here at the school. Oh, absolutely. I would never suspect you of anything. However... She gave what appeared to be a mischievous smile. What a terrible teacher I would be if I allowed a piece of my students' personal property to go to waste without doing anything about it. I blinked awkwardly upon hearing that. What? Why, Chili put on a mock gasp. Snips's umbrella. The poor little fellow forgot to take it home. What a good deed it would be to personally bring it to his family's household, so that it won't get devoured by moths in its neglect. But he didn't bring an umbrella at all with him this morning. There's not even a cloud in the sky. I froze in mid-speech, blinking. Wait. I turned and squinted at her. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? Cheerilee replied with an innocent smile. Tell me, Miss Heartstrings, are you in a hurry to get back to Candlelight this afternoon? I looked at her, then grinned. I'm not in a hurry to go anywhere. Ever. Cheerilee rang the doorbell to the straight-edge family household. A dog barked 2 condos down. Birds chirped and flapped about in reddening sunlight above. I've done this 2 or 3 times before, Cheerilee murmured aside, balancing the umbrella in her saddlebag. I used to teach in Philadelphia, you see. Were there a lot of troubled households in Philadelphia? I asked her just as quietly. She merely looked at me. Oh, right. City a brotherly shove, I said with a slight chuckle. How stupid of me. Shh, somebody's coming. I nodded, and let Cheerilee take the spotlight. There was a fumbling noise just from beyond the door. Soon, the entrance opened, and my heart stopped at the sight of a tall, pale unicorn with a brown mane and even browner stubble. His eyes squinted at us with a cold, bored expression. Oh, hello there, Mr. Straightedge, Cheerilee said, cheerfully. I do apologize for bothering you, but I think your son Snips left his umbrella at the school today. You don't say, Straightedge mumbled, his dull eyes flitting towards me. Who's this? I fumbled for words, feeling the urge to shiver, and not from the cold. Thankfully, Cheerilee spoke up for the 2 of us. Oh, this is Miss Heartstrings. She visited from Camelot today to give the students a speech on music history. Snip seemed very pleased to learn about the topic, and he even asked a few exciting questions that the entire class was happy to have answered. But I digress. The umbrella. She raised it before the stallion's grasp. I'd hate for it to collect dust at the classroom. He telekinetically snatched her from her grasp and levitated around before his eyes. Can't say I've ever seen it before. His tone was dull, unmelodious, like a ringing of metal against metal. You sure it doesn't belong to another one of your students? Oh, oh dear. I could have sworn he brought it to school this morning. Cheerilee smiled and gave an awkward laugh. I've been grading so many papers lately. I could very well have been mistaken. No harm, no foul, he muttered. Exactly. Your house was on my way home from the school building, and I thought I'd return the item just in case. Well, thank you for the thought, Miss Cheerilee. He gave the umbrella back, but I'm afraid it's not ours. My, you do have such a lovely home, Cheerilee said. Has any pony told you that? Straight Edge glanced lethargically at the sparse garden, flanking the prettier ones of the neighbors. Really? Oh, it's such a tranquil side of town. I almost wish to live here instead of the edge of Ponyville. I'm sure you and your family have some amazing stories to tell, she said, laying the charm and friendliness extra thick. She smiled his way. Come to think of it, I don't think I've ever had a chance to sit down with you and Mrs. Edge for a personal conference between parents and teacher. Why? His eyes narrowed like dagger tips. Has Sniff's been acting up again? I bit my lip and looked Cheerilee's way. She was already smiling and saying, As a matter of fact, he's been on his best behavior as of late. If you allow me, I'll gladly fill you in on it. He stared at Cheerilee, then at me, then at Cheerilee again. His nostrils flared. Sure, why not? His voice was neither angry nor optimistic. He snorted like he was marching through a cloud of fumes. Pivoting, Straight Edge marched into the household. The two of us didn't realize it was an invitation until we heard his bass voice shouting towards the atrium ahead. Autumn, Snips, Windsong, we've got company. Cheerilee trotted ahead. I followed her, hesitant at first. I telekinetically closed the door behind me, becoming engulfed in the sense of the household. The air was sour and unpleasant. I couldn't tell if it was a condominium being rank, or just my forlorn imagination telling me that it was supposed to smell bad. I always feel a certain disconnect from myself when I walk into a stranger's household. Everything appeared normal as we walked into the living room. Photographs of colorful, happy ponies lined the walls. I saw a kitchen with a refrigerator full of bright, foolish sketches. The dish cabinet was fully adorned with pretty, antique saucers and silverware. If I blinked my eyes, the snapshot I'd receive would look no different from the inside of the houses that my aunt and grandmother used to own. The whole place was normal, peaceful looking. What was I expecting from Snips's household? Was I letting my assumptions get the better of me? For a moment, I felt fearful for Cheerilee, but she looked like she was on top of the world. She smiled and sat on a sofa across from Mare, who was suddenly there. A yellow unicorn with a long red mane sat with a folded book before her forelimbs. From the way she was parked on the furniture, I could only assume she had been sitting there for the majority of the sunlit day. She smiled and shared a few words with Cheerilee before giving me a polite nod. Her smile was as fragile as porcelain, and there was a slightly hollow look to her eyes. I felt my nervousness rising again, but I said nothing. There was another pony in the room, a filly. The little unicorn was perhaps 3 or 4 years younger than Snips. At a glance, I wouldn't have imagined the two ponies were related. She hardly took notice of Cheerilee and myself when we walked into the room. She busied herself with a series of crayons that she was sketching along a white sheet of paper. I saw gentle, colorful strokes that illustrated houses, castles, dragons, and other fantastic equestrian sights. Snips? Straight Edge was uttering again, louder this time. Where are you, son? Oh, you don't have to summon him, Cheerilee said. I already told him how proud I was of his behavior as of late. His grades have been improving too since the school year began. Do you know that he scored the second highest in our pop quiz on paleo equestrian biology? He has an avid fascination with leviathans and sea serpents. I sometimes wonder if his cutie marks are just an innate desire to dissect old fossils. The mare on the sofa beside her chuckled as well. Oh, that's such a joy to hear, she said. There are times when I think Snips forgets that he's earned his cutie mark. Sometimes, I think he just forgets to care, Straight Edge added. The mare took a deep breath, fiddling with her book as her eyes fell on the sofa's hoof rest. It's taken a bit of coaxing, but I can vouch for the fact that he's paying more attention to his studies. I imagine it hasn't been easy for him, what with my disability lately. Oh, I remember hearing about that, Shirley remarked with a concerned look on her face. She leaned over and placed a gentle hoof on the mare's forelimb. Just how is your horn faring, Mrs. Autumn? It aches less these days, Miss Cheerilee. Snips's mother replied with a calm smile. With therapy, I've managed to have less and less seizures. The doctor says I've been making a great deal of progress. This ain't a medical checkup, honey. Straight Edge uttered from the kitchen. Through my peripheral vision, I saw several containers stacked on top of one another. When I turned to look, the grizzled stallion was standing there behind the counter, staring unemotionally towards us. The containers were gone. Miss Cheerilee has given us her sweet time to talk about her son's learning. But of course. Autumn smiled and looked towards us with sleepy eyes. I'm sorry if he's been giving you more trouble. Nothing of the sort, Cheerilee said happily. As a matter of fact, I figured I'd drop word of how good his behavior has been as of late. On the side of scoring well on pop quizzes, he's displayed a vast improvement in civility. Why, just the other day, Miss Smith showed up to deliver some lunch for her granddaughter Applebloom. On the way out of the school building, the old mare stumbled and fell. Snips was the first and only colt to walk over and help her up. I thought it was the most charming gesture I'd seen all week. Oh, Autumn smiled gently. That does sound awfully sweet. Straight Edge marched over towards the center of the room. You're just making that up. Hardly, Cheerilee shook her head. Snips is a great deal more mature than the other colts his age. He just hasn't chosen to show signs of it until recently. Would you like to hear some more? Straight Edge merely exhaled. His wife, Autumn, leaned forward and said, I would love to. As Cheerilee continued, I stood by her side, tried my best not to look nervous. I glanced up a flight of stairs to see a tiny, portly figure staring down from a thin bedroom door. As soon as my eyes reached the second floor, the coltish face disappeared. Curious, I glanced down at the filly, who I presumed to be the one named Windsong. The longer the conversation lasted, the tighter and tighter she curled up to the sheets of paper she was drawing on. I saw her shoulders bunching together, and I couldn't help but notice how close Straight Edge was standing to her the entire time. I took a deep breath and tried to relax. It was not my place to come to wild conclusions. After all, Cheerilee was doing more in a single breath than I could ever hope to accomplish in an entire day's worth of rambling speech. I listened as she expertly plugged little details, both accurate and exaggerated, about Snips's behavior as of late. She found tiny moments to summon a word or two from his parents, and I could see how she was structurally turning the conference into something akin to an unofficial interview. What was more, with each passing minute, the portrait of the household was becoming blander and blander. Eventually, the dialogue digressed into Straight Edge's line of work, the homemaker hobbies that Mrs. Autumn engaged in, the friends Song had been making next door, and other subjects of everyday conversation. Admittedly, I was starting to feel more at ease. However, each time I glanced up at the second floor, I could make out no signs of Snips, and a part of my heart kept beating at a tense, steady tempo. Well, Cheerilee said, as the door to the Straight Edge household closed behind us. The sun was halfway through setting, and the two of us trotted out of the yard and towards the sidewalk bordering the adjacent street. That went awfully well, wouldn't you think? I didn't realize Snips's mother was dealing with so many health issues, I remarked dully. I was staring at my hooves as we trotted along. It was a detail I almost completely forgot about until I saw her again. If I recall correctly, Snips's family came to Ponyville because Nurse Redart and several of our colleagues at the local hospital had experience in the field of feline therapy. She turned and smiled at me. I don't suppose any unicorns in your family have suffered from acute magical disconnect. It can be terribly troublesome to the nervous system. I've heard stories, I murmured. It's very painful, and it takes years to recover from. And I can't think of anything more distracting than having one's mother suffering and not being able to do anything about it. Cheerilee paused to turn and rest a hoof on my shoulder. Miss Heartstrings, I greatly appreciate your initiative in bringing your concerns about Snips to me. But what I think we have here is a case of a young and growing colt feeling anguish over his mother's health. With the inability to express himself, it's not uncommon for a young male pony to exert his frustrations through senseless outlets. However, all is not lost. She leaned back and smiled. Mrs. Autumn, as it turns out, is getting better. And now, thanks to our little conference, I think I know what to talk to Snips about the next time he acts mean to one of his fellow students. Yeah, I guess so. I took a deep breath. Still, isn't it strange that I didn't show up the entire time that we chatted with his parents? Not even once? Shyness shows up in the most unlikely of places, Miss Heartstrings. Don't let Snips' rough exterior fool you. He's a darling at heart, and I think there's still hope of reaching out to him. Yeah, I nodded, smiling gently. I guess you're right. Well, I have to go home and get caught up on grading, Cheerilee said. Miss Heartstrings, I can't thank you enough for all the contributions you've made today. This goes above and beyond what I requested of Professor Blue Noise. She smiled sweetly, her eyes sparkling. Is it possible that I might bless the school with your presence again, sometime before the year's over? Perhaps you would like the chaperone for the upcoming field trip to the Candlelight Gardens. I chuckled nervously, avoiding her gaze. Well, I gulped and gave her a weak smile. I'll definitely consider it. One thing's for certain, I will never forget what happened this day. Then perhaps my students aren't the only ones who learned something, she said with a wink, shuffling the umbrella in her saddlebag. Have a happy evening. Yeah, sure thing. I turned and trotted away. You too. Miss Heartstrings? I turned and looked at her. Yes? She blushed slightly, blinking in a confused manner. Where are you off to? I thought that you were staying at your friend's relative's house next door to the Edge family. Oh, I smiled awkwardly. I, enjoy going for walks, and Ponyville is a pleasant town for a stroll. Isn't it, though? She waved and trotted off. Toodaloo. Yeah, bye. I waved back, limply. I took advantage of the fact that her back was to me and stood there, watching her bright figure walk away until it became one with the crimson heaven of evening. A sigh escaped my lips, and I looked with exasperation towards the unkept lawn of the Edge family household. I could only blame my analytical self. I could only blame the ponderer, the scavenger, and the pillar of forsaken songs within this weathered unicorn's soul for such pathetic awkwardness. Had I changed so much over the past year that I was bound to forever see things between the lines that weren't really there to begin with? I was no schoolteacher, nor was I a psychiatrist. Cheerilee was infinitely more qualified for both of these things than I would ever be. Who was I to assume so much about Snips without seeing it with my own naked eyes? Colts will be colts, and cursed ponies will be cursed ponies. With a shrug of my shoulders, I turned to trot towards my distant cabin to the north of town, when I heard a noise. It was more pronounced than the muffled shout that I thought I had heard the previous day. If I didn't know better, I could have sworn I detected something breaking. I almost ignored it. I almost kept moving. But a part of me that was still lonesomely cognizant, the part of me that shivered from the throes of her unsung touch, forced my hoofs to swivel around. I turned and glared at the front of the house. There was another sound, louder than the first, and this time I could have sworn I saw the windows to the front of the house shaking. I peered down the sidewalk. Cheerilee was a distant speck. I looked towards the other end of the path. Ponies were going about their daily lives, returning home, engaged in conversation. Not a single one was looking my way. In a single breath, I strolled back towards the house, snuck past the gate, and slid up to the condominium until my ears were almost pressed up against the building face. I took a deep breath and listened. Beyond the punctuated thuds of my heart, I heard voices from within. In perfect clarity, Straight Edge's growling breath was the loudest of all. I had the life in my teeth for you, boy. To think of all the slack I give you. Look at me when I'm talking to you. But I don't understand. What did I? You were out stealing random crap from the ponies around town. How many times have I told you to quit snatching whatever you can get your grubby little hooves on? What? Dad, I wasn't. Don't talk back. She told me you left an umbrella at school today. We never bought you an umbrella. So how did you end up with one, huh? Umbrellas? Pfft, who cares about umbrellas anyway? Snips's voice was cut off by what could only be described as a clap of thunder. I felt a bone-chilling thump, and some female voice gasped amidst the echoes of it. I won't stand to have thieving ponies in my very own house, Strange's rumbling voice resumed. We stand to lose enough as it is by moving to this sneaking town. Straight, honey, for Celestia's sake. Can't you see he doesn't know a thing about the umbrella? And you. What in the hell was that all about just now? No pony outside the household needs to get an earful about your sickness. Certainly not Miss Cheerilee. Next thing you know, they'll think we're begging for bits out on the street. I was only making polite conversation. There's no need to take this out on our son. If he wasn't such a brat to begin with, his teacher wouldn't have been poking her head around. And she certainly wouldn't have to pick up the slack for the crap he's stolen. I didn't take no pony's umbrella. Shut up and go to your room, because I'm sick to death of you sassing me. I'm telling you, I didn't. Something wrong with your ears, boy. Go back to your room and do your homework. I swear to Luna. Is it enough that I work my spine off for your ungrateful hide? Or do you want to go back to Manhattan? Because I can pack up our stuff and take the whole family tonight. How long do you think your mom's gonna last back in her old hometown, you selfish little turd? No, I I don't want that. Huh? Um, no, sir. Now scram. All I wanted was to have a peaceful, quiet evening, but you screwed that up. Again. All this time, there was a sobbing voice, rising in pitch and volume. That is until Straight Edge snarled once more. Damn it, Windsong! Shut up and go back to drawing. You're almost as bad as your worthless brother. Heck, you're already twice as brainless. Straight Edge? I don't want to hear it, Autumn. Bits are thin enough for me having to pay for another one of your damn seizures, so just can it. The house was gravely silent, save for the telltale thumps of Snips's hooves limping, not walking, up the stairs to his lonely room. I could barely stand straight at this point, for I was trembling too much. Gulping, I turned, looked down the sidewalk, and scampered in the direction Cheerilee had trotted off to. In less than 2 minutes, I caught up to her. Cheerilee! I galloped to a stop, panting. Quick! You gotta come back! Uh-huh? She turned around, blinking at me. I was right all along, I exclaimed. As soon as we left, there were noises coming from the house. I listened in, and, as Celeste is my witness, I heard Straight Edge shouting at his family. I think he may have hurt. I'm sorry. Cheerilee squinted at me. Oh, what's all this about? You know Snips' father? I paused, blinking stupidly. I felt the chills catching up to my sweaty body. Yes, Snips' father. You just finished having a conference with him and his spouse. Huh, Straight Edge, Autumn. Julie's eyes scanned the horizon. She reeled, as if dealing with a wave of dizziness. I think I met them when they first came to Ponyville. She smiled thinly at me. Why? Is something the matter with them? I teach for the sun at my school in the west side of town. I blinked at her. I groaned, running a hoof over my face. I was there, of course. I was there with you the whole time. That's why. For the love of Celestia. Isn't it enough that ponies just forget about me, and me alone? Uh-huh. She made a strange face. I'm afraid I don't understand. Some pony's forgotten you? Are you looking for some pony in Ponyville that you know? I chewed my lip, shivering. I looked back towards the house. As the sun melted beneath the west horizon, a foreboding shadow loomed over the building, obscuring the dull surfaces like a worn gravestone. Ma'am? Cheerilee blinked. Without saying a word, I turned and trotted away from her, and swiftly abandoned the condominiums altogether. I breathed evenly, peacefully. I was in control of myself. Every inhale was calm, and every exhale was precise. Clutching the Nightbringer, I tilted my head up, and looked beyond the tempestuous fountains and chains of the unsung realm. High above the metal fields of moaning prisoners, her spear loomed. The object spun circles within itself, brimming with lightning. I stood where I was on the rusted platform, with the chaotic cosmos turning all around me. I didn't say a word. I simply played Twilight's Requiem over and over again, staring at the levitating throne of an aloof goddess, my eternally stubborn music partner. With quiet patience, I had hoped to coax her out of hiding. I sat there for the space of an hour, the longest time I had ever spent in the dimension beyond the firmaments. Nothing happened. She didn't approach me. Her spear didn't even float a single inch closer. I was the only mortal creature in eons to have entered the realm of the unsung, and in spite of all my power and abilities and knowledge, I couldn't do a single thing about it but sit there and soak in the annihilation. At least if I was a shackled pony, I might have had a purpose there. As the tempest consumed the heavens and echoed thunder across the firmaments, I felt like I could just as easily have been watching a picture show of a faraway, fantastical place, rather than actually being there. All the fear was gone, and so was the charisma to surpass any of it. I exhaled the defeated breath and hung my head. Gently, I played Penumbra's Echo and departed from the unsung realm, as if I hadn't even been there to begin with. I sat on the cot in the middle of my cabin, surrounded by books. I swear that I read the same dozen pages over and over again, and on each perusal, I failed to take in a single paragraph to memory. Night lingered outside. Al was playing with a ball of string in the corner. The fireplace crackled, and its amber light glinted out the brilliant body of the Nightbringer atop a nearby end table. After several minutes, I groaned and rubbed hoof over my face. I had spent an hour in the unsung realm. I had spent twice as much time poring through ancient books and candlelight music. Still, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get the shouting voices straight edge out of my head. Autumn's murmuring voice lingered along the corners of my memory. With each heartbeat, I felt the thump of Snails' landing body, and then the whimpering sounds of windsong stabbed at my consciousness. On top of that, I still couldn't sleep. The crazed enthusiasm that made me visit Cheerilee's school 2 days in a row was fading. What lay beneath was a manic unicorn, some pony I hadn't associated with for months, when madness was something fresh and alarming, instead of enlightening. I don't know what to do, Al, I muttered. I'm in the right place and the right time, but what does it matter? Even if I intervene, what impact will I have? It's the same as it was with Morning Dew, and with Twilight Sparkle and Moondancer. Heck, the only reason I ever saved Scoodledoo's life was because she saved mine. I chuckled bitterly. It seems as if this curse has me making better use out of my uselessness. Al rolled over the string, paused to catch his breath, and gazed innocently my way with the flick of his tail. I should stop thinking so much about it, I muttered. I've not been to every single household in Ponyville. For all I know, horrible things happen in this town on a daily basis. I fidgeted. I should just focus on the goal that I have, 'cause it's the only thing I have in my power to fix. So long as I get her to help me and... Something inside me twitched. The room felt colder, even with the embers of the fire dancing brightly just a stretch away. I bit my lip. It's easier just to finish this damnable nocturne. I stifled a whimper as my insides knotted up. Shivering, I looked over towards the orange tabby on the floor. Al, could it be possible that I'm less afraid in the unsung realm than I am in this town? Have I grown that distant? I gulped. That aloof? Just like she is? Al barely moved. He didn't even purr. My nostrils flared. I turned towards the Nightbringer once more. It was momentarily blinding to my weak eyes. The power of a goddess in my hooves, I murmured, frowning. And I ran like a filly, a cowardly little filly from Snips's house. I sighed hard. The walls of the room started to bend and buckle. In order to not collapse, I forced my eyes shut and drifted.